So I did my final project on the movie Life, and I'm going to touch on a few things that I feel like went really well in the movie. So I have trauma, which could lead to PTSD, and then isolation, flight or fight, and fear. And so in the movie, it's set in a space station up in outer space just orbiting the Earth. There's six astronauts on there for this expedition. They have to retrieve some samples being sent to them from Mars and analyze them. So they are having a little trouble in the beginning getting the samples because the samples were thrown off course by a meteor shower, but they still end up getting the samples safely on board, so the whole mission isn't ruined. And so they get the samples and they start testing them in the lab. And they notice that the samples are just a large single cell, and they try different things, changing the oxygen level, the carbon level, even the glucose level in its little habitat, and it finally starts growing. And what they notice is that it is 100% muscle, eyes, and brain, like the whole thing. Kind of scary, but yeah, so it starts growing really, really rapidly, and they ended up naming it Calvin, so they refer to it as Calvin. And by day 25, it is massive. So, day 25, they thought it was dead, but it turns out it was just in like hibernation, so they were trying to stimulate it back. So they start shocking it, and it starts being hostile at this point. And so it breaks the scientist's hand that was in the thing. It gets out of its habitat and starts climbing around in the space station lab. So they knew this wasn't good, so one of the other astronauts went in there to save the scientist, and he got locked in there. He then tried to kill the thing with fire and everything. It didn't work, and then Calvin ends up killing the astronaut and then getting out of the lab. So this becomes a problem. Then they try to contact NASA, telling them, hey, everything's going wrong, it's hostile, like we don't know how to kill it. But Calvin cuts their communication because he sucks all the coolant out of the communication box, because Calvin also needs oxygen and food to survive. And so he's running around outside of the spaceship for a while, and then he gets back in and he starts killing off more people, until finally the end of the movie they get him off the spaceship because the spaceship is destroyed. And then I won't ruin the ending for you, but it was pretty crazy. But so with that, I said obviously that these people, when Calvin started attacking them, were in a lot of fear. And fear we define as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous and likely to cause pain or threat. Obviously Calvin was killing them to stay alive himself, so they're pretty fearful. And that brings me to how it was a traumatic situation. Like, and trauma we define as a type of damage to the mind that occurs as a result of a severely distressing event. They were watching their friends die. This alien was trying to kill them. Like, if they survived, that's going to lead to PTSD, probably, for sure. I mean, we can't assume that, but I'm going to say it'll probably give them PTSD. Like, that's kind of terrifying, and that would take years of therapy to get over. I also wanted to bring up the point that they were isolated, and isolation is defined as the process or fact that of being isolated. They're in space, like there was nowhere to go. They were on the space station and they couldn't contact NASA, and if they go outside they're gonna die, so there's really nowhere for them to go. They're completely isolated and they were alone and they didn't know what to do. And so also they showed a great example of in the movie of the fight or flight method, which we define as a physiological reaction that occurs in response to a perceived harmful event, attack, or threat on survival. Like I said, Calvin's been trying to kill them so he can stay alive. So either they're gonna run or they're gonna try to fight. And most of them tried to fight because, I mean, there was nowhere really to run. They were trying to figure out how to kill him. They tried to deprive him of oxygen by, like, secluding themselves in one part of the station and then cutting off oxygen to the rest of it. They tried burning him. They tried getting him outside and, like, keeping him outside. Nothing worked. But some of the other astronauts actually did try to hide. This one guy hid in a sleeping pod, and Calvin tried to get in, but he couldn't get in. And the guy was very thankful, but still, he was just hiding. But I mean, yeah, those were all the psychological things that I saw in the movie. It was a really good movie, pretty, like, anxiety rising just watching it, so it was fun to watch, but it was also fun to, like, dissect it all and see all these things that we can now talk about as a class. So yeah, that was my presentation, and I'll post my discussion question at the bottom. Thanks so much for watching, guys.